Okay, good evening, students. Today we have Dr. Sumana Datta, and I am requesting Farah Madam to introduce Dr. Datta now. So, Farah, please.
Okay, sir. Good evening, everyone. Okay, today I'm going to introduce you with Dr. Sumana Datta. Dr. Sumana Datta completed her post-graduation with a specialization in clinical psychology from the University of Calcutta. She was awarded the Junior Research Fellowship from the Indian Statistical Institute in 2013 and conducted her PhD research there as a research fellow of the Psychology Research Unit from 2013 to 2019. Her contribution to academia have been recognized with the Best Researcher Award in 2020 and the Best Teacher Award in 2021 from Adamas University, Kolkata. She also received the Arise Research Grant from Adamas University for her work in psychometry. Dr. Sumana Datta is currently an assistant professor in the Department of Psychology at Government General Degree College in Singoon. Previously, she held position as an assistant professor in the Department of Psychology at St. Xavier University, Kolkata, and as the assistant professor and head of the Department of Behavioral Science at Adamas University, where she also served as the assistant dean of student affairs from 2019 to 2022. She is honorary research secretary of the Bangladesh Psychometrics Society, honorary member of the Research Advisory Board of the Institute of Psychometry. She has taken class on interview technique and grounded theory in 1 month online certificate training course of qualitative research methodology in June 2023, organized by RPRIT. In addition to her other accomplishments, Dr. Sumana Datta's paper, co-authored with Dr. Datta Roy and Murshida Khatun, was published in the Journal of the Indian Academy of Applied Psychology in July 2023. The paper titled Verbal Reasoning Abilities Predict Academic Achievement of School-Going Adolescents, Evidence from the Indian Population, highlights her valuable contribution to the field of psychology.
Oh, very nice.
Yes, Sumana ma'am, I want to express my heartfelt appreciation for your work. Your impressive achievements in psychology are truly admirable. You will be teaching research methods to 6 dedicated postgraduate students with backgrounds in psychology and teaching. I wish you the very best in guiding and inspiring these students on their academic journey. Your contribution to their education will undoubtedly have a lasting impact. Ma'am, you can take over from here.
Thank you, Farah. Thank you, sir, for inviting me. And it is always a pleasure to be back with sir and to take classes in RPRIT because sir has guided me for a very long period of time. And I've learned so much from sir in all these years. So definitely whatever I am today, a big part of it is actually whatever I've gained from sir, I've learned from sir. And I'm sure that all the participants who joined this particular course and will be taking, participating in the classes and submitting the assignments, I'm sure that all of you will also be benefited from the different classes and deliberations. And of course, you have a lot to learn from sir himself. So thank you very much for inviting me. And yeah, so I'll be taking, I think 8 classes have been assigned to me. So today we are going to start with the observation method. And let me just share my screen with you all. Please let me know if all of it is visible, slideshow.
Yes, ma'am, it is visible.
Okay. Thank you so much. So we start with the observation method. In the observation method, I think in your syllabus, there are the two types of methods, two types of observation methods have, are mentioned, but I'll be covering, all the methods, and I'll try to include some examples from previous researches, and also some research methods, specific research methods, which are based on observation as a technique. All right, so let me know whenever and wherever you have questions, and we can have a discussion. All right. So it is a technique that involves systematically selecting, watching, listening, reading, touching, and recording the behavior and characteristics of living beings, objects, or phenomena. So when we are saying that involves systematically selecting, this word, this particular term, systematic, is very important. Why it is important? Because this is where we differentiate between observation as a method and simply seeing something. Okay, so simply seeing something is completely different from the observation method itself, in terms of the fact that in observation we not only just see things, or we not only just try to see and understand whatever the phenomena that is occurring. We do not do that. We actually look into things in a very systematic way. Systematic means in a very scientific way, and we record it in a scientific manner. Okay, so whatever we are watching, listening, reading, touching, whatever we are doing, we do it in a very scientific way, in a systematic way. And what do we observe? We observe the behavior and characteristics of living beings, okay, human beings, animals, objects, or phenomena. A particular behavior that can be an example of a phenomena, particular behavior which is elicited in a particular situation. Okay, so the researchers adopting this method attempt to understand behavior and societies by getting to know the persons involved and their values, rituals, symbols, beliefs, and emotions. So that's why observation as a method is very much in use in different disciplines, not only in psychology, but in different disciplines of social science, anthropology, and all such kind of disciplines where we deal with human beings. Okay, so it helps us to understand behavior as a whole and the context of it. See, the context of it is very important. Whenever we are trying to observe a particular behavior, the situation where the behavior is taking place, that is very important, because that defines the nature of that particular behavior. Okay. So here, if we look into the history of observational learning, how observation as a method came into being, or was popularized, it was with the work of Albert Bandura. Okay, so I think all of you know about know this name, Albert Bandura, and what he did, to his contribution in understanding psychology, in understanding behavior. We know, right? So Bandura actually did so many different experiments, okay, where observation as a method was used, and to understand how learning actually takes place. All right, so a child watches, for example, a child watches their parent folding the laundry. They later pick up some clothing and imitate folding the clothes. So what is happening here? The imitation that is happening is actually done through observation. Okay, another example, a group of children play hide and seek. One child joins the group and is not sure what to do. After observing the other children play, they quickly learn the basic rules and join in. So you see how observation is used to learn a new behavior. Okay, so this particular instance was actually introduced by Albert Bandura in his line of research, and it actually helped us understand the phenomena of imitation, observational learning, and so many other learning methods which we know today, right? So observation, if we try to break it down into a number of stages, we get this 4 different stages. Okay, selection, recording, analysis, and interpretation. Selection is where we are selecting a particular aspect of observation. Okay, what we actually want to observe. That is a selection part. All right. Then recording, to keep an account about the observed aspect in writing or some other permanent form, where we are trying to record the behavior observed, whatever we have observed. It can be recorded in the form of, say, in a recording device, we can record the entire thing as a video file, or we can keep it in the form of audio. We can just keep a voice recording of the description of the event. All right, so whatever be the a manner in which we are recording the entire aspect is important, the entire phenomena is important. Okay, all right. Then analysis is examining the element or structure of the observed aspects in detail. Okay, so once we are done with the observation part, then we go for the analysis of the observed aspect. Okay, whatever we have observed, we need to analyze it further into elements and basic structure. Finally, the interpretation. So that involves explaining the aspects of the observation or providing measurements. Okay, so what are we concluding after the observation is done? Okay, what are we ultimately, what is the output of the observation? An example can be that, a researcher who is, this is actually presented as a case study in one of our books, actually. So this researcher, he wanted to understand, how students carry their books while they enter the university campus. All right. So, so the selection stage here involved, selecting the specific behavior. What is the specific behavior? Carrying the book. How people are carrying their books while they are entering the university campus, right? So that's the selection of the that particular behavior. All right. Then comes recording. So he kept an account of how the students were entering, the males and the females, how they are entering the university campus carrying their books. All right. So then he analyzed. So he looked into the frequencies. For example, he observed that females, they generally carry their books by keeping the books close to their chest. All right, while males, they carry their books on in a sidewise manner. So they carry it in their hands, lateral to their body. Okay, sidewise they carry it. So this was the difference which he observed, while sitting there and recording the behavior. So in the analysis part, he looked into the frequencies of how many boys actually were carrying the book in that way and how many girls were carrying the books in that way. So this was the analysis part where he compared the frequencies of each occurrence. And finally, he interpreted that this is how boys carry their books and this is how girls carry their books. So that's the entire stage of observation. And this has actually a lot of applications in different settings, specifically in clinical setting. There is a lot of application of the observation method, because as you know, we observe patient population. For example, suppose a clinician wanted to look into the maybe a specific behavior, for example, a hand washing behavior of a patient, and wanted to understand, how many times the hand washing is happening and how it is related to the severity of, say, the disorder, like the OCD. Okay, so the clinician can actually observe the patients by using a video camera, and then try to watch and observe and record systematically that how many times a patient is actually washing his or her hands, and then try to correlate it with the severity of the disorder. Okay, so in that way, there is a huge application of observation as a method in different settings. All right. Advantages. So there are 4 main advantages. We can see directness, natural environment, longitudinal analysis, and non-verbal behavior. Let's see each of these. Directness, well, we can collect data at the time they occur. That's the major advantage of observation. Okay, so generally in other types of methods, research methods that we use, for example, if you are using a questionnaire, or you are going for an interview technique or something, in any of those, you have to ask the person that, okay, did something like this happen to you? If they say yes, you record it. Okay, likewise. So across the different research methods. But if you consider the observation method, here we do not go for asking them that whether this has happened to you or not. We observe. It's like a live telecast. It's like when the behavior is actually happening in in that particular situation, we are observing the behavior itself and we are recording it, right? So that is the directness that we are talking about. So observation method gives us this advantage over other different methods where we can record a particular behavior directly right when it is happening. Second, the natural environment. So observation method, again, it facilitates collecting data in the natural environment. So we do not bring the subject or the person whom we want to observe in the lab and then we do whatever we want. We can just if you want, for example, you want to observe and you want to understand, for example, what do people do in the airports when there is a long layover. Okay, maybe for 3 hours or 4 hours or 6 hours layover. During this time, what do people do? Right. So how will you do it? Are you going to bring them in your lab and then try to record what they're doing? No. If you want to do something like that, you have to sit there in the airport and then keep on observing people, try to understand what is happening there, right? And many people who actually those who are working in the area of social psychology, and then there are many sociologists who are working in these areas, and they actually do such kind of research in the natural setting of the subjects only, right? So they don't go for lab settings and do their research there. All right, so natural environment, that there is a huge benefit of collecting data in the natural environment. Why? Because when we are collecting data in the natural environment, it increases the generalizability of that behavior. Okay, all right, so you'll be able to conclude that, all right, since this is happening in this particular situation in the natural environment, next time the same situation occurs, same behavior will take place. All right, so that's the generalizability, and that is what we call the external validity of the research. So if your if the conclusions of your research is something which is generalizable to a large extent, then you can say that your study has external validity, right? So observation as a method actually facilitates this to a large extent, right? Third, longitudinal analysis. All right, so here, since what is a longitudinal analysis, where we are trying to study something, okay, a particular behavior, a setting, whatever, for a long period of time, right? So what happens in a survey or an experiment? There we can bring the subject for to the lab or to a particular setting for a very short period of time, and you cannot ask the person to come to your lab every day, right? You cannot do that. So what you need to do is you can just call them once in the lab setting, and then study a particular behavior, and then it's over. You cannot call the subject to come over every time you need them to give you data. So that's the problem with such kind of research methods, right? But there are many such cases where we actually need to go for longitudinal analysis, right? So in such cases, it can become a problem. For example, suppose you want to see maybe a child who is having a particular condition like autism or ADHD, and a psychologist is trying to work with that child. Okay, some special educator is trying to work with the child, and has developed a particular schedule or a set of protocol for teaching the child to learn a particular behavior, right? Now, this is something where you need to do a longitudinal analysis. Longitudinal analysis, why? Because you need to keep on recording whether some improvement has happened over the time or not, right? So when the child is learning, and we all of us, we know that it takes actually a lot of time, right? For a child with autism or ADHD, if we want them to learn a specific behavior, right, it takes them a lot of time to learn. It's not like typically developing children, right? So they have to practice the same thing over and over again for a long period of time. And as a researcher, you have to keep on recording their improvements over the time, right? For many days together, right? So in such cases, observation as a method is actually a blessing, right? Because there, what happens is that we can give the intervention and then observe the child for a long period of time. It can be months together, it can be a year together or more, right? And then we can try to interpret whether improvements have occurred or not over time, right? So such kind of researches actually require methods like observation for for any in any sort of interpretation that we want to draw, right? Finally, non-verbal behavior. So observation is definitely superior to survey research, experimentation, or document study for collecting data on non-verbal behavior, right? Because non-verbal behavior is something which where or where we cannot just try to record it by recording the audio or video like that, right? So non-verbal behavior is something where subjects, they don't tell us things, right? So it is there are certain situations where we might require to record non-verbal behavior, right? For example, consider a patient, okay, who is having an episode of major depressive disorder, right? So in such cases, what happens is that there the patient will refrain from telling you things, right? You keep on asking questions. Mostly what happens, such kind of patients, since they are having a severe level of depression, they won't tell you things. They will keep on fidgeting fidgeting on their own, and expressing their frustration in other ways, but in different non-verbal ways, but they won't be telling you what they're feeling or what is actually happening to them if you ask questions. So in such cases, you have to make a diagnosis on the basis of the non-verbal behavior only, nothing more, right? So in such cases, observation as a method is it actually helps a lot, because in such cases, through observation only, we can try to we can make certain conclusions about the behavior of the person, and we can make a diagnosis, right? So in that way also, observation actually gives us a lot of advantage, right? So these are the advantages of observation as a method. Okay. All right. Is it clear to all of you till here? Any question?
It's clear, ma'am.
Okay, good. So we can proceed to the next part. So there are the types of observation. We will be discussing these 3 types: naturalistic, controlled observation, structured versus unstructured observation, and participant versus non-participant observation, right? So naturalistic observation. So as the name suggests, here we are observing people in their normal environment, right? Normal here means the natural setting, okay, where whatever it is, where we are seeing that there is no deviances, okay, no form of deviances in the environment. So that is considered as the normal environment of the person, okay, whom we are observing. Often used in the study of animal behavior, okay, because for animals it is difficult to study certain behavior in the lab setting. Definitely we do study certain things in the lab setting. We know that in under the behavioristic approach, there are so many different experiments which were conducted by Skinner and Kohler, and those experiments actually were conducted in the lab setting, and it helped us to learn a lot about how learning takes place, right? But to understand other types of behavior which are not concerned with learning, okay, there we actually rely on naturalistic observation, right? It involves observing and recording behavior as it naturally occurs, providing insights into the real life behavior and interactions in their natural context. Involves observing and studying the spontaneous behavior of participants in natural surroundings. So spontaneous means not something which we are telling them to do. Okay, it should not be that when some particular behavior, it should not be that where we should not be telling them that you have to do this or you have to do that. Okay, it happens in the experimental situation. In the experimental situation, the researcher actually explains the instructions to the subjects, and they tell the subjects that you have to do this, you have to do that, and the subjects, they follow the instructions, right? So that happens in the experimental situation. But here, we do not tell them to do anything. We just observe their spontaneous behavior, the natural behavior that occurs in their natural surroundings. Okay. The advantages, generally it is used to generate new ideas. Okay, entire situation can be studied. That's another big advantage. So when we are studying something, we are able to study it in its entirety. Okay, entire situation we are studying simultaneously, and more insight is gained when we are not creating the particular situation for the subjects. What is happening here is that we are gaining a lot of insight out of it. Okay, because it is a natural surrounding where a particular behavior is happening. We are not creating conditions for the subject. So whatever behavior is occurring, it is a spontaneous behavior that is occurring, and that helps us to know a lot about a particular phenomena or a particular behavior that is occurring in a particular situation. All right. Disadvantages: not possible to observe all types of behavior in a natural setting. Definitely, there are many different, specific types of behavior which do not actually, it is not possible for us to observe it in the natural setting. For example, suppose you want to understand that among adolescents, you want to study their aggressiveness. Okay, so maybe verbal aggression or something. To what extent the adolescent behaves aggressively in a particular situation. Now, of course, no person will behave aggressively on their own, right? There must be a particular situation which should elicit the aggressiveness in the adolescent person, okay, or any other person for that matter. So in such cases, you have to create the situation. You have to create that particular setting where the adolescent will actually express their aggressiveness spontaneously, right? So such kind of behavior do not actually occur in the natural setting, right? So in such cases, naturalistic observation is not possible. Okay, many instances of behavior do not repeat themselves. That's another disadvantage. Okay, so there are many specific types of behavior which can occur, but it occurs only once in a particular situation. For example, suppose slip of tongue. Okay, so suppose a researcher wants to study or to understand wants to understand the which are the situations or what leads to a slip of tongue to happen in a particular situation, right? Now, slip of tongue happens for all of us, but it happens whenever it happens, immediately we recognize that a slip of tongue has happened, and immediately we rectify ourselves, and it doesn't happen again. We do not repeat the slip of tongue over and over again. Okay, so that's the kind of problem that happens if we try to do it in a naturalistic setting. Then it is a problem. Okay, because there this particular instance, this slip of tongue will not occur twice. It will occur only once, right? So in such types of instances, naturalistic observation is not possible. All right, you have to intervene in some obvious ways, manners. You have to intervene in such cases. All right. Okay. Next, controlled observation. It is just the opposite of naturalistic observation, where we are carrying out an observation in the lab setting. Okay. The observer decides where the observation takes place, at what time, and under what circumstances. Okay. So there is a complete control of the observer or the researcher in this case. And here we use standardized procedures. Standardized procedures means where we are observing different persons under the same setting, same conditions. So we create the same conditions for the behavior to occur. For example, a researcher, this type of controlled observation is used a lot for studying infants. Right? Why? Because for infants, it is not possible to, if we do not use standardized procedure, it will be difficult to generalize. All right. So what happens there? The researcher actually, creates the setting for the infants. All right. Maybe they want to understand, for example, they want to understand whether the infant who is probably 1.5 years old, such kind of infants, whether they are able to observe and recognize landmarks or not, right? So we all know about landmarks, right? When we use landmarks to navigate in any situation. You want to go from one place to another place, we use landmarks, right? We give for our postal addresses also, we use landmarks for better identification. So suppose a researcher wants to identify whether the infant is able to identify or recognize landmarks or not, right? So in such a case, how can we do it? The researcher can create a setting for the child, for the infant, where the infant might have to navigate from one place to another place. And generally, the mothers are used for the destinations because the child is automatically driven towards the mother. And, in the process, different landmarks are placed at different points, and the infant, and it is, the researcher wants to just, observe whether the child is able to recognize the landmarks or not to reach the mother or not. Okay. So there you have to use standardized procedures. You have to place the landmarks at specific points. Okay, between the distances should be constant. All right, and the directions should be constant, and all those things should be given in a very standardized manner. Why? Because if it is not given in a standardized manner, you cannot make generalizations based on that. Okay, so generally in such kind of researches, landmarks, controlled observations are used to a large extent. All right. So if you go through different studies which are published on infant research, there you can you will be able to see that there are many researchers. They can study 25 infants or 30 infants or more, and all of them, they are placed under the same situation in the controlled lab situation, and then the process is interpreted. Okay. So the researchers actually sets specific conditions, variables, and procedures to systematically observe and measure behavior, allowing for greater control and comparison of different conditions or groups. The researcher decides where the observation will occur at what time, with which participants, in what circumstances, and uses a standardized procedure. Participants are randomly allocated to each independent variable group. This is also done in the controlled observation setting, where sometimes participants are yes, trans preferential looking experiment. Yes, one such example. Okay, so they are randomly allocated to each independent variable group. All right, and these are also usually non-participant, okay, where the researcher avoids any direct contact with the group, keeping a distance. Generally that happens, all right. At other times, the researcher can use a confederate, okay, in large groups where researchers, a number of researchers together, they are using a controlled observation method for their research. Sometimes it happens that maybe one or two of them can act as the confederate in the research setting, although the participants are they are not made aware of such things. Okay, so one of my student was actually working in a lab in the Leipzig University. So there, she was doing research on infants. So she and her supervisor, they were actually conducting the research. So she acted as one of the confederates in that particular research, although she was one of the researchers. All right, so that can also happen in the controlled observation setting. Advantages can be easily replicated by other researchers by using the same observation schedule. Since it follows a systematic manner, a standardized procedure, that's why the replication, chances of replication is actually high in this case. Okay, other researchers can also replicate it. Observer can have control over variables, less time-consuming method compared to naturalistic observation. Actually, a lot of work which were done by Jean Piaget. I think all of you know his name, Piaget. So Piaget did a lot of work for his theory on cognitive development using controlled observation. Okay, and later on it was replicated by a lot of other researchers at a later stage. If you read the book that was published by Jean Piaget and Inhelder, their joint work was published in, I think, 1959. That was the book they published. So if you go through it, you will see that how they actually designed such kind of controlled observation techniques, okay, settings, and they actually studied a lot of children of different ages to understand the phenomena of their cognitive development. And Piaget's theory was actually developed based on the findings of such kind of research. All right. Disadvantages can be that participants behave differently since they know they are being observed. Okay, so that's why controlled observation is not very much useful for adults, because adults sometimes, for adults it actually leads to this kind of a problem that definitely if people know that they are being observed, they will behave differently. That is not very much valid for children, because children or infants, that's why controlled observation is used a lot for infant research. All right, so yeah. Next, structured observation, also called systematic observation. Okay, yes, Hawthorne imprint. Systematic observation, here coding scheme is used by the researchers. All right, so here different types of coding schemes are used, where we use different codes to for the analysis of the recorded data and its interpretation. So it's a data collecting method in which researchers gather data without direct involvement with the participants. All right, so here the advantages is that there is a greater control of sampling, measurement of errors. These are the things that we can have a better control over in case of structured observation, where we are actually doing the observation in in a very systematic manner. all right, permits stronger generalization and checks on reliability and validity of the research findings, similar to a survey, but questions are not asked. Here it is, just observed. We are just observing the participants, and then we are systematically we are doing the observation and trying to interpret the results. All right, so that's why we have better control over the error part. We can minimize the random error that otherwise occurs, and we can have a stronger generalization taking place. All right, disadvantages can be that language and cultural barrier can be a problem in this case. If the researcher is, for example, that you might have seen that different anthropologists, they work in this way. They go to different tribes, okay, deep into the forests and barren lands, and then they observe people, okay, and they try to understand their culture, their rituals, their beliefs, their lifestyles, right? So in such cases, the language and culture can be a barrier if we are going for a structured observation. In such cases, structured observation is very, very difficult. I won't say impossible, but it is very, very difficult, right? So generally they go for naturalistic observation. You cannot just, customize the conditions for your observation in such cases, because there are a lot of extraneous factors which will play an important role, like the cultural or the language barrier that we are talking about. All right, so people may behave unnaturally as they know that they are being observed. So in a structured observation, it is obvious that people will, because you are manipulating the conditions and the variables, there is a possibility that people will be knowing that they are being observed, and that's why they will behave unnaturally, right? Unstructured observation, where we are not following any specific structure, any specific format, right? And as in the case of naturalistic observation, so this one involves the researchers recording the behavior that they can see. So of course, advantages can be that it provides rich qualitative data, but the disadvantage can be that it can be difficult without the use of recording equipment. Since we are not following a particular format, particular structure, what happens here is that we are just recording the behavior as as it is occurring spontaneously. So that's why if we are not recording it properly, then it can be a problem. Later on, you will find it difficult to interpret the results. All right. So for example, observing children playing with their new toys, field observations, surveys, etc. So I'll give you an example here. In certain cases, for example, we know that children who are having autism, okay, they play differently than other, typically developing children. Okay, so for example, they will prefer to line up the toys like that. They won't be just playing with the car. They will just take the car, invert it and just keep on touching the wheels of it. Okay, so they just love rolling the wheels, okay, by inverting the car, but they will not just try to play with the car in the in ways in which a typical developing child will play with it. So now in such cases, if we are trying to observe the child and understand whether the child is having autism or not, we have to record it in certain ways. We cannot just look into it and make a conclusion based on one one particular setting or one if a particular behavior is occurring once. We cannot say something like that. We have to observe it in a systematic manner, and then record it and interpret it. So that's why recording is very important if we are going for an unstructured observation without any format. All right. Okay. Participant observation involves active participation of the observer, where the participant observation, where it happens that we are the researcher is actually, or the observer is actually participating in the observation process itself. So it is of two types. One where the participants are aware that they are being observed, which is called overt participant observation, and the other type where participants are not aware that they're being observed, and it is called the it will be covert. Sorry, it's written overt, but it will be covert. Okay, it's a typo. So covert participant observation. All right. So these are the two different types that we generally use in case of participant observation. Advantages can be that researchers are able to be honest with the group in overt participant observation, while covert participant observation may be the only way to gather knowledge on illegal activities. Okay, so if a researcher wants to understand, say, for instance, the researcher wants to understand the drug taking behavior among adolescents, right? Now, in such a case, okay, if you just ask as a researcher, if you just go and ask a college student, for example, that, okay, do you take drugs? They won't tell you anything, right? So moment they become aware that they are being observed, they won't tell you anything. They will try to hide things, right? So in such a case, if the researcher wants to understand and study the drug taking behavior among adolescents, the researcher will have to go for a participant observation, but in a covert manner, in a hidden way, where the participants will not be knowing, they should not be knowing that they are being observed. Okay, otherwise they will be self-aware and they will hide things, right? So there are situations where there are cases where we have to go for covert participant observation. Okay, not knowing they are being observed avoids the observer effect. Okay, if they don't know that they are being observed, then what will happen? They will this type of bias will not actually take place. Okay, where we know about Hawthorne effect, right? So such kind of bias will not take place in such a case, right? That's the advantage. Disadvantage, it may lose objectivity and can become biased. In certain cases, it happens that in participant observation, although the researcher is going for participating in the research as a participant, okay, one of the participants, so it can happen that the researcher, if the researcher is not very experienced and not very objective in his or her approach, it can happen that the researcher might lose the focus after a point of time, or might become too involved with the participants such that they may lose the objectivity and can become biased in certain cases. All right. Okay. Non-participant observation generally involves observing participants without actively participating. Okay, where we are not actively participating as a whole. Okay, and we are just observing from a distance. So advantages are that participants tend to act more realistically in such cases because they don't know that they're being observed, and the researcher has no influence over the situation. So they can avoid the bias that can happen due to the researchers or the observer effect. Okay. Disadvantages, observer may not get a feel of what is happening. Okay, and it can be harder to find or back up a hypothesis without influencing a participant. Definitely, if we are, not, making the participants aware that they are being observed, or if they have no idea that they are being observed in a particular study or a particular research, it can be biased in certain cases, such that we may not be able to get the exact data that we want in certain cases. All right. So that's the non-participant, the disadvantages of the non-participant observation. Okay, so this one actually presents a comparison of the overt and covert types of observation and participant and non-participant observation. We can see the advantages and disadvantages in for each of these observation types. All right. So I'm not going into the details of it because I think we are running short of time. So I'll just quickly discuss some of the observational study designs. Okay. So now that we have discussed the different observation methods, okay, the different methods which we use for observation, it is important to understand that these different observation methods are used in different study designs. Okay, when we are developing a study design, a research design, there we can use different types of observation for carrying out a particular research. So an observational study is when researchers are looking at the effect of some type of intervention, risk, diagnostic test, treatment, without trying to manipulate who is or who isn't exposed to it. Generally used in clinical settings, we use a lot of observational study designs in clinical settings, right? So this differs from the experimental study where the scientists are manipulating who is exposed to the treatment, intervention, etc., by having a control group or those who are not exposed, and an experimental group or those who are exposed to the intervention, treatment, etc. Okay. Generally, these are the three different types of observational study: the case control observation study, cohort observational study, and cross-sectional observational study. Okay. Case control observational study. Here, researchers in case control studies identify individuals with an existing health issue or condition or cases along with a similar group without the condition or the controls. Okay, so there we compare two different groups, okay, to identify the predictors and the outcomes in the clinical setting. So it is helpful to generate a hypothesis that can be researched. So for example, patients with depression are more likely to develop a cardiovascular disease. Okay, so this is a hypothesis, right? Now, if we want to test whether this is true or not, we can go for a case control observational study in this case. Okay, and we can compare two different groups, one who are with depression and they are developing a cardiovascular disease, and another group where they do not have depression but they are developing a cardiovascular disease, and we can try to see for whom the incidence is more. Okay, so that's an example of the case control observational study. Cohort observational study, this type of observational study is often used to help understand cause and effect, right? And this one looks at causes, incidence, and prognosis. In a clinical setting, we look for the cause of a particular disease or a condition, disorder or a condition, the incidence of it, okay, what is the incidence in the population, and the prognosis. Okay, what is the prognosis of a particular, after a particular intervention is given. So a cohort is a group of people who are linked in a particular way. For example, a birth cohort would include people who were born within a specific period of time. So for example, if we say that all those who were born in the year 1995, okay, so that's a birth cohort.
right? So scientists might compare what happens to the members of the cohort who have been exposed to some variable to what occurs with members of the cohort who haven't been exposed. For example, babies born in the post-COVID period are more susceptible to pulmonary diseases. Okay, maybe that's a hypothesis. So if we want to test this hypothesis, we can go for cohort observational studies. So babies who were born in 2018 or 2019 are compared with babies who were born in 2020 or 2021 or 2022, right? And we are comparing these different groups, okay? Because one of these group is not exposed to COVID virus, another group is exposed to COVID virus, right? So that is where we are bringing in the cohort observational study design. All right. Cross-sectional observational study. Unlike a cohort observational study, a cross-sectional observational study does not explore cause and effect, but instead looks at the prevalence. Okay, so researchers would simply observe and record information about something present in the population without manipulating any variable or intervention. So this is generally used in psychology, education, and social science research. For example, susceptibility to depression increase with increase in stressful life events, right? So this is something that we are just observing. What is the prevalence of it? Okay, in the population, those who are having a high stressful event, experiencing high stressful event in their lives, whether they are having higher susceptibility to depression or not. Okay, so we are not looking into the cause effect part. We are not trying to see whether incidence of higher stressful life event will lead to higher susceptibility to depression. We are not looking into that. We are just looking into whether those who are having a higher susceptibility to depression, whether they have experienced higher stressful event in their lives or not. So just the prevalence of it. That's the cross-sectional observational study. Right. So these are the different research designs. There are many others, but these are quite popular ones which are used in the clinical setting, clinical research. So, here we are directly using observation as a method, for conducting such kind of researches. All right. So advantages and disadvantages of observational study design. Primary advantage is that they can generally be completed quickly and inexpensively. We can just observe and we can conclude. So it is inexpensive in comparison to other methods like experiments and survey research, etc. It can be more easily designed and completed. Okay, we do not have to go for a lot of randomization and sampling techniques and all those specific requirements of a research. We do not have to go into such details, but we just have to, we can design it in this way, and we can execute the research. Disadvantage being that they are more open to dispute than a randomized control trial. Okay, randomized control trials are more used in clinical setting because there we are we can randomize the participants across different groups, and we use control groups in comparison to clinical groups. Okay, that's the advantage of randomized control trial. And generally, in evidence-based practices, randomized control trial are considered as a higher quality research in comparison to the observational study designs. All right, so that's the difference. Of particular concern would be confounding biases. This is when a cohort might share other characteristics that affect the outcome versus the outcome stated in the study. An example would be that people who practice good sleeping habits have less heart disease, but maybe those who practice effective sleeping habits also in general eat better and exercise more. So we are not looking into the effects of eating better or having or exercising. We are not looking into that. We are just looking into the sleeping habit. So there, this the food habit and the exercising, that can probably has act as confounding variables in this case. All right, so that can be the case, right? So I'll just stop here, and if you have questions, please, you can go on. You can unmute yourself, or you can write down in the chat box. Okay, so we discussed the different observation methods today, the advantages of observation method and the different methods. We looked into the advantages and disadvantages of the different observation methods, and then finally we discussed the observational study designs. All right, so I'll stop here, and if you have questions. Is there any question? Okay, so over to you, Farha.
Hello, students. It is clear to you? Different types of observation method Madam has taught you. Hello, Barsha.
Yes,
Shukshiti.
sir. Yes, sir.
Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Shukshiti, clear?
Yes, sir.
So different types of observation you have understood today. Monalisha, Shati.
Yes, sir. It is clear.
Okay. So thank you, Shumana. Your lecture is clear
Thank you,
to
sir.
all the students.
Okay, thank you everyone for your patient listening. So I think I'll share the assignment for this lecture. I'll share the slides first, and I think then it will be beneficial for all of you. So if you have questions or if you have any doubts in the next class also, you can ask if you want. So that's all for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Shumana.